It's multiple pages.
Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting. And then Tim, take it away.
So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I appreciate your extra time here tonight. I just wanted to bring up a few items for the Finance Committee and get your buy-in on a couple things. Most of the time tonight, I think we'll be speaking to the first bullet item, which is to discuss the 22-23 budget revision proposal I've prepared. I'm just seeking your approval to load this into our systems and report under this revised appropriations. Also, we'll talk briefly about the tax certiorari that we're aware of and what we're not aware of as the pending year proceeds, and also the new financial format that George took some time to prepare for us and we'll be using going forward pending your comments. And of course, any open forum and questions. So I'm just going to get right to the third page with the color on it. Second and third page. This is the budget as it was approved in the middle column in the white, and then in the yellow is a revised number per some review I've done on activity that based on the past fiscal year. So there's just a few line items I want to change. The primary one was first number there, change of 90,000 on the New York State retirement. However, last minute review of that and discussion with our prior fiscal officer suggests that these numbers came direct from the retirement system. So I'm going to eliminate that change to 300,000 and just hold it to the 210. And we'll hold that. And then there's just some smaller changes beyond that that just would get us aligned better with prior year and what we really expect to see happening, and a few comments on the side of each one for my reasoning of that. So starting with the changes of 10,700 under the telephone, that's just a trend we're seeing. I'm not sure if there were some previous IT things that have been eliminated through other systems, but currently we've been averaging 6,000 a year. So I want to bring that down to the trend. And then equipment and furniture, I took some funds out of that primarily because of the renovations. Most of the furniture has been capitalized, and I don't envision that we would need $25,000 of additional furniture. So that was brought down for that reason. And again, these are all open to discussion or dismissal if you like. I'm just proposing these. Then there's the equipment lease, again, following the trend of 6,000 a year. I brought that down from 10. On the next page, I did bring down marketing and advertising. Since again, the trend has been 1,500. Trend being the last 3 years of activity, not just the last year. It could be higher than that if we're coming out of COVID and doing more things. I hadn't really considered that until just a moment ago. So maybe we hold that. But anyway, that was another reduction. Following that is the $2,500 increase to staff recruitment. The note being the HR position as well as any other new openings that might occur. But primarily right now we're advertising for the HR position, and I expect that to be at least $1,000 to $2,000, and so that's already above the approved budget of $500. The next change I'm proposing is the auditor fees, and it's been $17,500 for the last couple of years, but I just expect that, in my experience, I see annual increases to auditing fees, so I just put a cushion in there for that, and that's coming up actually in the next month or two. They'll be here and finalizing it in October. The next change I propose is the $17,500 on technology software. I think at the time of the budget, we had not implemented the RFID and a few other items, and so we've just seen that last year that it really did bump up closer to you can see last year's actual of 66,000. So I want to bring that up and cover that, and the reason being the new RFID, the cloud, and the collection HQ softwares that the library has implemented. And then the next is a $15,000 change to utilities. And again, that's what we're seeing right now. We're all aware of the inflationary impacts. Hopefully energies come back down, but I want to, again, adjust that so we wouldn't be explaining deltas to budget and saying inflation all year long, and just say we're on budget. And then lastly, to cover all those changes would mean a change to the capital improvement line of 87. Now, if we remove the New York State retirement, the first item I mentioned, will be about even with the original. So the rest of it's just paying for itself. Some of the subtractions, some of the additions kind of wash out, and we're pretty flat on the capital improvement line. Should we hold to the 210 in the retirement line? So today I'm just asking for your review of this, any questions you might have about it. Are you okay with us changing that? Again, my intent was to keep it at the 4,174,000. I haven't changed, the approved total expenses approved by the taxpayers. I'm just trying to redistribute the appropriation lines. And just for further information, another thing I'm learning, and I don't know the specifics just yet, but sometimes when you're off on appropriation lines, particularly if it's material, at least in some state government reporting, they say you have to get approvals for those appropriation changes. So if we don't change them now, I feel as though I might have to come back to you during the year as we see what the actual is coming in at and say, oh, we're overspending on energy as I expected, but now I need your official approval to overspend on that appropriation line. I don't know if that's true for libraries, but it's something I did learn in a recent training that appropriation lines need to be approved. So I'll open the question and answer section. If you have any.
I have a couple. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And this is probably just because I'm new to this committee. Is it standard practice that the budget has been revised in past years? Okay, so okay.
It's my review as I've been here 4 months.
Mhm.
So I was just reviewing a budget that was prepared before my tenure and trying to see if it was reasonable and what expect, so I could warn you if there was anything that was significantly off. These are not significantly off, other than what I thought was retirement until a few minutes ago. So, if everyone's comfortable just leaving it as is, I'm not like advocating, I'm just suggesting that this would be a reasonable change and maybe avoid questions in the monthly reviews that George will prepare for you, or I will prepare for George and he will present to you. And we won't always have to explain that, well, it's inflation, or it's this, or it's that, or it's trend. Just trying to avoid some future questions by answering their questions now.
Yeah, absolutely. Have the auditors questioned this in the past when things
They
have been
have
off? Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not sure the auditors would get into the level of detail
No,
where
I
they
don't
would
think so
question
either.
it. I mean, and I think Tim's right. Like when I look and you said you were new and I've been here for all of 2 months, 3 months or something, but I've done this for a while. And, I think these would be good changes, just as Tim said, because then as we look at it, it's like when we look at variances, it's never going to be perfect. Like when we look at this month's, expenses sort of go up and down and you can't anticipate that. But, I think you can kind of look at it and get trends. And I was reading in a book by the Library Association, and it said that, it is appropriate to change the budget. I mean, I wasn't looking for that. I was just reading it for knowledge. And, so I don't think it's, I don't think it would be frowned upon by anybody. So.
I mean, so my initial reaction is it seems reasonable to me, and I think it makes sense, to have our budget kind of be as realistic as we can make it. If we have new information or just have revisited it and realized that the numbers are not quite right, I'm all for kind of just getting things in line with where they ought to be. I'm curious whether any of these, I know it's we have change of personnel and everything, and some of these just might be kind of a difference of just a difference of judgment of, but I wonder if there's any of these, the differences, the changes here that are things that you think ought to have been anticipated when we did the budget originally, and are just as we go forward for next year, like things to be thinking about and aware of, so we can kind of do better the first time around and not have to make as many corrections.
Sure. I'm not familiar with the previous processes, but I've had a lot of experience with preparing budgets, and I'll probably do a lot of analysis, and be watching the trends as I propose a budget in the next coming year. So I'm not I'm not frowning on anything anyone did here. Some of these things I just don't think they realized at the time, particularly utilities. It's just, it was only in the back half, well after the budget was presented, to the committee, that they start to see these increases.
Actually,
And they could come back down and I could be off, from my proposal. But I just wanted to have it there in front of us in anticipation.
Actually, in our budget message, and if I'm guilty of anything, it's, enthusiasm and optimism. But in our budget message, we said we'd be spending less for utilities because that's what the new, technology was promising. But then the inflation a year ago was, much lower than it is now. So.
And I think the utility rates have changed significantly as well, just even beyond inflation, not that.
How bad would it be if we hadn't done that project?
Yeah.
So,
I have one other question, and then I promise that I'm done. But there is a proposal in the board packet about the cafe, and I think it's $17,500. How does that fit into the current budget?
Yep, that's a good question. It's not part of the operating budget.
Uh-huh.
It's part of a capital budget.
Oh, okay.
And it falls under the guise of the original referendum, and there's still.
So it's in the
It's-
loan, basically,
okay.
yeah.
There's still funds left within the bonds and the GPL contribution to do that.
That's it. I just was.
Yeah. Any capital project will fall outside of the operating budget.
And also just for your knowledge, for the last line, the capital improvement line, which is where we had this 267,000 budgeted there, that number is not based on, an estimate of what we'll actually need for capital improvements this year. That's basically kind of the balancing figure from the amount we were allowed to get under the tax levy. And then after we had kind of budgeted for all of the other lines, basically that's the leftover that was there to do it. So that's money that, we're not anticipating we're going to spend anywhere near that this year. There's nothing planned or expected. So that's flexibility we have. That's money that will just roll over into the fund, So.
I actually have had 4 different fiscal officers here, and this is the first time that this approach was suggested, and I like it myself. I think it's might be a good practice once or twice a year to kind of just, how are we doing?
And I guess I just like the fact that the last year's actual were there, so you could kind of see it and everything. And, as we're doing the budget, you don't have the benefit of a full year, but I think, we should have enough that we can project it pretty well, so.
I said that was my last question. But and then I have another one. If you plan to remove that 90,000 that was in here, do you still want this number to ultimately balance to the approved
I
budget
do.
dollar figure?
Yes.
So do you
So
know
I'm
what
gonna
you're
put it
gonna
back.
do with that
Well,
extra
it's gonna-
3,000 or what is?
It'll just fall back onto the capital.
On the
improvement
cap,
line.
okay.
Yeah. The balancing line. if you will.
Maybe something 2,700 or whatever.
So I mean, I would think if, I guess, if we want to kind of approve these changes, then the committee would probably just have to recommend that to the full board
That's-
to vote
That's
to
why I
do that.
called you today.
Right, so, okay. Right. I mean, I'm fine with that. I don't know if we want to take a vote as a committee to recommend that to the full board.
Certainly, I would second your motion to recommend this to the board.
Just a quick thought, that is a thought I actually get from Natalie. So the difference between Natalie and me is that she's worked in 4 different public libraries and been a board member at 2 others. And I've just worked in 1 public library, and then a museum library and university library before that. So she's got a lot more comparative basis, and not as a criticism, but I just think it would be, if we can get used to it, just a great practice just to have a short finance committee meeting once a month. She says that in every other public library she's worked in, that's been a standard practice. And from the director's point of view, I just welcome, where I'm coming from is I would welcome additional eyes and additional sort of questions. I don't think there's any problems over the last 7 or 8 years, but it just seems like a good due diligence step if everybody likes it. So
So just procedurally, because did this go out to the whole board or just to
Did
the
not,
finance?
I felt it more appropriate.
And that's totally fine. So I would think since getting this updated, there's not any kind of time pressure on that. We're just trying to, get this more in line, but if there's nothing in the next month that's going to push us over our budget, if caps or anything, I would think it would make sense for me, I can kind of report out of the committee meeting to the board at tonight's meeting and let them know that, we're recommending this, and then they can be kind of sent around to everybody in advance of next month's meeting and actually do the vote next month. And that way, if people have questions that aren't on the committee or whatever, then they'll have time to see it. I don't want to kind of spring it on people tonight and just say, we're voting right now when people haven't had a chance. So that's what that would be my approach, if that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Quickly, are we set there? I don't know.
I'm
Go on to the next. Okay. The next agenda item was the tax certiorari. So we've all heard of this and what's happening in the town of Guilderland, and I just want to bring the finance committee up to speed first, in that I do have word from the school district that we can expect about $81,000 invoice from them for some settlement of some of the certiorari claims and litigations, and that should be probably forthcoming in August or September. So the remainder is unknown, but it could be as much as another 200,000. Based on some previous communications I've had from the school district. So I just wanted to bring you aware of that. Now, that said, some of that, from a cash flow perspective, some of that may have to come out of the capital improvement line to cover the cash of it. It's not something we budgeted. It's not a budget line. Tax certiorari is not a budget line. But I just want to let you know that from a cash flow perspective, we're taking in 4.1 million. And we'll have to pay 81 from that, maybe more. And there's other funds from prior years that may be applicable to use, but just want to come up to speed on that.
Guys, quick questions on that. So there's 81,000 here, and then you're saying a 200 on top of that 81. So
As much as.
so up to maybe 281. Okay. And then I see on the okay. So that makes sense. I had another question on the budget sheet here. There's under the grants line, there's that notation in red saying expect 311,000 additional near grant funds. We're just trying to think of our overall budgetary, situation.
Yeah,
Is that-
that will be additional cash coming in, but that will probably go towards the building funds that we're continuing on,
Okay.
So,
Okay.
okay.
All right.
And that will be a source of cash. It is, we booked it last month, I believe, right? So the
It's
revenue
on a-
was in last year.
Yeah, it's an accrued grant payable.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's on the balance sheet, expecting the cash, and I'm having correspondence with the divisions that monitor this and pay out the balance. So we're just making sure they have all the paperwork in order. I don't know the exact timing that we'll receive that cash, but that will cover capital expenses. So lastly, in the format, George sent it out to everybody. I only put it on the agenda in case there were questions or concerns about it, or any recommended improvements or changes to it, for the sake of this finance committee meeting. But
And I guess just to say, I mean, it's, none of the assumptions, none of the processes have changed in terms of how they close the books. It's really just that I grouped all the categories the same way, essentially the same way that the auditors do. So instead of us showing 13 lines of cash and cash equivalents, it's grouped, just so it just makes it, in my mind, easier to kind of, instead of looking through a lot more accounts and to see differences. And I included the prior, what I'll do going forward is always include the prior month balance sheet as well as the prior June 30th balance sheet. And right now, the prior June 30th, last month, is the same. And it's marked internal. Once the auditors finish it, then the audit numbers will go in here. And I guess I just always like being able to look at current month numbers and see, well, what's happened during the month, and well, what's happened since the last time it was audited. And then, things pop out that are just unusual and everything. And I guess the gray, the areas that are in gray, and there's quite a few of them, are numbers that are only changed once a year. So the numbers in gray are the same as June, and they were the same as a year ago in June. And they're numbers that come from the pension reports and calculations of like the other post-employment benefits, which is, I believe, we pay a benefit to people if they've been here, I think 20 years and meet certain criteria, then they get something towards health insurance after they leave. And the one little thing is that under accrued expenses, the number is a little bit different, but 90% of that number is accrued payroll, which we adjust once a year, and an accrued pension expense. And so, you know, it might change $1,000 a month. So I guess I just like to focus on, you know, bigger numbers. And when things look different, then I do have on the spreadsheet all of the detail, and you can figure out what's different. And the statement of revenue and expense, it's the same format in terms of looking at current month information and year-to-date information. And 99% of the time when I do this in the first month, I get the year-to-date to match July. I'm always nervous about that, and it does. But it falls in the same categories as the audited statements, except I did group together all other revenue. They break out 10 different line items that just, there's not that much there. I mean, there's, you know, a few $1,000s, and try to put it as much, I follow the same order that they do, which essentially, you know, highlights the higher expense items like salaries and wages are probably 70 some percent of our salaries and fringe benefits are probably 70 some percent, and not unexpectedly library materials is, you know, the next highest item. So it's not exactly in descending order, but somewhat close to that basically. So I didn't think it was that radical of a change that I thought that if you didn't like it, I would ask for forgiveness rather than asking for approval in advance and everything. So that was my thought on it. And if there's things that people want to see, you know, I mean, I think we cover most of the important things and talk about it, but if there are things that, you know, that you think should be on the financial statements or that are of interest, we could do that as well.
Any comment?
I like the one.
I like this. Yeah.
And I guess having said that, thank you. And I always have to acknowledge that, you know, it's like I present them and do things, but Tim and David and Tim spend hundreds of hours of work every month, like getting everything ready, and then I just come along and say, oh, look at this pretty thing, you know. So kind of like being a grandparent, you get to do the fun things and not all the work. So
It's important. It's so important.
it is, I think.
So thank you. We probably should adjourn the finance committee meeting at this point. It's nearly 6 o'clock. But I thank you for your time. I'll make the change to the proposal and I'll get it back out to the finance committee and the whole board. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
No, you're cutting on.
Yeah, do we want a bottle of water?
Faster.
Bottle of water.
Oh, sure. You said it was
I said a
yeah.
bottle of wine.
Sure.
We have a minute before we start, or
Yeah.
how much time we have? A minute or two?
Yeah, I mean, we can take a minute, I think.
I think we're still waiting on people to arrive.
Yeah.